I think I'll start an app. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard that from people that think all they need to do is create an app and everything else takes care of itself. In today's episode, you're going to meet a young woman who is taking the app world by storm. She is the co-founder and CEO of YourBeet, a Swedish food tech startup. YourBeet, an app that makes it super easy to transition to a more healthy, sustainable, and personalized food, is like Spotify for plant-based recipes that meet the personal digital nutritionist. Anastasia is not just creating an app, she's got an entire team working on the process and a business plan that can't be beat. So stick around.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
So, Anastasia, it's really fascinating what you're doing with YourBeet.app, and it's an app for people who want to transition to a plant-based lifestyle. Now, how long have you been plant-based and vegan?
Actually, Kathleen, first of all, thank you so much for having me on this show, right? I think we just connected a few weeks ago, and I'm just this first-time startup founder from Sweden, and I can't still believe how receptive you have been, and you just took me straight away under your wing, and here we are, right? So I just wanted to, before jumping into it, say a huge thank you, because I am very grateful and just overall grateful to be part of this vegan community that just is so passionate about helping other people in the community and helping people outside the community, obviously also discover this amazing way of eating. So it's been, I feel very blessed in that sense that I have been so well received in so many places. So I'm very grateful for that. But to answer your question, right, I think for me, I love sharing my story, because I think as kind of this busy professional that I have been for now many years, and kind of being focused very much on a career, right, rather than kind of coming to my health through the bad experience of actually, starting to have health challenges instead of actually prioritizing that in the first place. So that's actually how I started already maybe 5 years ago, when I was living in Australia back at the time, and I was working as a management consultant. So it was like 100-hour work weeks, right? So it's like 2 jobs at the same time almost, right? And of course, like I was so focused on career and pushing myself and pushing my health and never thinking about really what I was eating. It was just more optimizing for convenience. So of course I started to see my health decline so fast, right? Being always stressed and traveling through the country, working a lot. So I started to discover really this plant-based, whole science around it, right? Gradually through this kind of fixing my health journey. And the more I read about it, and the more I learned about it, I just realized how little I knew about food, right? Because we get taught from such a young age what is good, what is bad, what you should not. And you never really question it because everyone else around you does it as well, right? So it kind of feels like there is no, need to question these things. And I have been healthy for most of my life, thank God. So it's really through this kind of personal experience. And I mean, now I look at it as a very pivotal moment, right? I can't maybe say fully that I'm happy for it, but it was definitely a very pivotal, life-changing moment that led me to actually discover and challenge so many things in my life that I took for granted. And a big part of that, of course, was food, right? And my attitude towards food and just my, choices around food that I choose to eat, right? So it was a very gradual process. I just remember, and that is also, I will come to that and explain why I decided to leave that very, high-paying job and start a startup right in the middle of the pandemic. It's just because I felt that I wished I had the service when I started my journey transitioning to more plant-based, because I just remember how time-consuming it was, and I just felt so isolated and alone and trying to figure this out by myself. I didn't have any friends who were, plant-based or vegan at the time. So I just felt so like I had to rediscover everything on top of this 100-hour work week, right? So I just remember it became my, biggest hobby and almost second job on the weekend, is really to research. And I remember reading also all this research, like scientific publications, because I wanted to understand about nutrition. Because my biggest concern was, well, if I'm no longer eating fish or meat, where am I getting my iron, or where am I getting my omega-3? Because you're taught that that's where it comes from, right? Because we never get taught nutrition, or at least we here in Scandinavia never get taught nutrition in schools. So it was really like this self-education process that we had to go through.
There's so much to unwrap with what you just said, because especially about being taught about nutrition. We were taught about nutrition in schools, but it was all lies. It was lies and manipulation. It was funded by the animal agriculture. It was funded by the food manufacturers. And I was listening. I actually went on a morning run. I usually run every day, and I was doing a 3-mile run near the river. And I was listening to a podcast about the whole COVID situation. And it's interesting because 25% of the people who had a lot of complications from COVID, and they've done extensive studies on this, had at least one underlying condition, whether it be obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure. Another 25 had 2% or two actual underlying conditions, and 49 to nearly 50%. So nearly 100% of people had underlying conditions, but 49 to 50% had three underlying conditions.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we were even taught about COVID has been misinformation. And I don't want to get into a political discussion. And I know people, when they hear you mention COVID and you say there are underlying conditions, they get really upset. But the reality is the healthier you eat and the closer to nature, which I love your app, YourBeet.app, and that's your BEET, like the beet, the food, .app. And I encourage people go there because I love what I found on your site. And it's all very healthy ways to prepare foods that many times we say, oh, I can't give up a certain food. And you reminded me of something when I was 21 years old. That was many years ago. I actually had endometriosis, and it was when they just discovered what endometriosis was. And my mother-in-law at the time was a Hispanic woman who I was married to the oldest son in the family. So it was expected that I would have kids. That was just part of the culture. And she said, do you think your health problems are a result of all the cheese you eat? And I thought, no, couldn't be. Well, they've actually discovered through testing, through studies, through research, that endometriosis is caused from inflammation, and cheese causes inflammation. So with your Beet.app, I'm curious, tell us more about the app and what you did when you first started it 2 years ago, and what have been some of the challenges to starting an app, because a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to start an app. They have no clue what they're talking about. And so tell us how you decided to name it YourBeet.app, and what the whole premise is, and just kind of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. But just to comment also as context, right, for starting this, or feeling so compelled and so called to start something like this, because also, like you say, I mean, if you look at the top 3 causes of death right now, it is all food related. It is all diet related. So surely if that is the case, then the current standard normal diet can't be right? If that is the top 3 leading cause of death, right, globally, it's of course the obesity, the heart, and some forms of cancer as well, the diet related, right?
Be sure to leave a rating and review of the show. And if you're looking for more visibility, be sure to download my free guide on how to increase your influence. It's called The Influencer's Guide. Simply go to veganvisibility.com/influencer. That's veganvisibility.com/influencer. Now, back to the show.
So it just didn't feel like what we're doing today is right, and there must be a better way. So we really set out on this kind of mission to really bring together, because the science is out there, right? So we are not doing the science. The science is clear about the benefits and about nutrition, of course, and what our human bodies need to feel our best. And there are also, of course, so many, plant-based recipes and creators and people who love to help people discover how to start on a plant-based diet. But we felt what was missing is this connecting platform that would really connect the dots between all the players in the food ecosystem, right? So what I mean by that is right now it feels like you can find, you know where to go to for inspiration, like Instagram, for example, right? And you know where to get your groceries. You go to a physical store and spend 2 hours a week shopping, right? And then you know where to find nutrition. You either see a nutritionist or you go and try what I did, right? Spend hours educating yourself. But I think what we saw also as part of when we started to do user interviews, really to figure out what was missing. Why is it? We actually discovered that Yale University did a study in the US where they interviewed people and asked them, about plant-based, their attitude towards it. And 90% of people said, or more even than 90% of people said that they wanted to eat more plants, right? They wanted to eat more plant-based, but only less than 10% actually did, right? So I think with the service that we're creating, that is the gap that we are trying to solve, right? We want to bridge this, 90%, or take this 10% that are already kind of doing it to make it the 90% that said that they want to eat more plant-based. And the main reason, at least from our user interviews and kind of user studies, when we set out on this mission, we found that the biggest, of course, causes for not doing it, or for kind of wanting but not taking action, is this whole, I don't know where to start, right? I don't know what I will find tasty. I don't know, it feels so much effort. And to be honest, this whole effort and time consuming bit is the highest barrier that we at least observed in our journey, right? And what I mean by that is, on average, Kathleen, did you know this? That on average, we make 200 food-related decisions per day. 200.
Get out. 200?
Right? Exactly.
Wow.
And it ranges from everything, right? It's like, when you're in a supermarket, should you take this tomato, right? And then, okay, should you boil this tomato or fry this tomato, or, put it in the oven, and should you put this spice or this spice on it, right? There are 200 food-related decisions per day. And we live such busy lives these days, right? We're all busy, career focused, we have families, we have just so much going on in our lives. All of us, the stress level is rising, there's pandemic, there are wars. No wonder, right? We feel that we don't have the brain space to make this 200 food decisions, or to rewire ourselves, because most of those 200 food decisions we do on autopilot, right? So when you grow up and you're already kind of preconditioned around what you should eat for breakfast or for lunch, most of those decisions you do on autopilot. You don't consciously think about it.
Right.
But when you're changing your diet, this is when you have to start to make this 200 food decisions consciously. So suddenly it becomes this task that you have to do every single day until it becomes autopilot again, which of course we know takes quite a long time. So this is the gap or the problem that we're trying to solve. We are trying with YourBeet app, we're trying to make it so easy and convenient, right? And this kind of hassle-free. We're helping people to make the right decisions for them, right? So they don't have to worry, they don't have to think, right? The answer is there and it's personalized to them. Actually, I mean, being a Swedish company, I mentioned that I lived in Australia, but I'm from Finland originally, and my team is all Sweden-based, so we're Sweden-based right now. But we got very inspired by Spotify, right? Mm-hmm. The Spotify is the success child of Sweden, right? That everyone knows and recognizes. But what is so brilliant about Spotify is what they have done, because they're not producing anything new in terms of music, right? The music was there, right? But before Spotify, you had to go on the web, find that artist, find their webpage, pay for that one artist, and then download it, and then assemble your own CD back then, right? To mixtapes. Mm-hmm. So what they have done is they've streamlined this process, right? They gave us not only access to all of the songs, but they also gave us the curation, right? Because what's so brilliant is when you open Spotify, it doesn't just give you access to 1 million songs, it curates it. It says, look, Kathleen, I recognize your music preferences. and I recognize that you will like to listen to this, right? So it helps you to make this decision, right? You don't have to think, you're like, oh, this playlist sounds cool. It says that it's personalized to me. Why not, right? And that's what the algorithm does. And that's what we are trying to kind of also not replicate, but in a way also adopt that methodology of, okay, but why are we not personalizing what we eat, right? Why is it that we still walk into supermarkets and we're, at best, if we have not planned anything, we just, okay, I'm super hungry, I'll just grab this, pasta and this sauce and make something out of it. But we still have no clue. Is this pasta and this sauce what our body needs? Does it have all the nutrition that my body needs? Like, why is it that we still don't personalize food when we personalize so many things in our lives?
That's incredible. I love your vision, and I love where you're going with all this. And I want to remind people that you're listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, and go ahead and subscribe wherever you're listening to this or watching this, and leave a review. We love to get reviews. We love to get feedback. And Anastasia, I'm curious, with what's on, first of all, I encourage people, go to your website, because you've got beautiful images of the foods. And I found one recipe, it's for the plant-based cheese board. And I'm like, plant-based cheese board. Okay, let's see what this is about. And you've got the herby cashew cheese. And I'm actually going to try that today, because it looks so simple. And I love that you have simplified it for people. So where would people find the app, first of all? How do they subscribe to the app? Is it in the App Store? Is it on your website? Where do people go?
Yes, a really great question. Thank you so much for asking. And also just to comment on the cheese, that was put together by a nutritionist. So of course, as part of our team, we do have a nutritionist. She's specialized on plant-based. So that has been the premise, or absolute not negotiable for us, is to make sure that we incorporate nutrition science into our app. And our app is grounded in nutrition science. So we are trying to democratize nutrition science and make it available for anyone.
Nice.
That is what our algorithm does. But yes, we are actually right now available on Apple Store and in the US, actually Europe, US, UK, of course, Australia. So not in every country, but I hope in your country, if you're listening to this. And we are launching Android version in just a week and a half. So basically next week, we will have also Google Play, or it available on Google Play as well.
Wonderful. And I'm curious, creating an app, I hear people all the time, they get this idea for an app and they go, well, I'm going to create an app and everybody's going to download it. It's not that easy. First of all, you have to come up with the concept. And like you said, we have a nutritionist that we make sure that everything is based in science and nutrition. And I absolutely love what you stand for, because the world is very sick right now. I mean, there is no disputing it. If we go back to when I was born in 54, and in 54, we had one perception of what healthy was, and then TV dinners came along, and then the food manufacturers, they did low fat, high fat, sugar this, sugar that. And it's crazy what we're subjected to, nearly 70 years later from when I was first born and what I was raised on. And people are getting sicker and sicker by the day. And it's kind of like we put a Band-Aid on it, and you're getting to the root of the issue. With your app, what about funding? Because you've got a pretty substantial team. You've got the vision of where you're going. There's the cost of production. There's the cost of research. There's, all the stuff that you're doing. How do you get your funding? And if somebody wanted to invest in your company, where would they go to do that?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. We have been actually extremely lucky and fortunate, because we have so many people who really resonate with what we do. I think it also, of course, helps that I think our team is we are quite experienced, right? So we bring 7+ years experience from our respective industry. I work for, this top management consulting company. So I also understand that it's like if we want it to be successful, and if we want to attract funding to an app, it also needs to have a commercial model, right? Because that is what investors will resonate with. And luckily, I think this has so much potential, especially when working with grocery stores, right? So for the user, we try to make it as free and accessible, but then find that kind of commercial opportunities, in the broader ecosystem, in the broader network, like the groceries and so on. So I think that resonated with investors, because we were very lucky to get 20 investors to fund our first funding round, and now we're actually starting to fundraise again, because the app is launched since June. And we have had really, really great, strong traction. Like, we see it resonates with users. We're constantly getting such positive responses of people saying, like, this is the app I wish I had, right? And also, even, it's so fascinating. There's so many use cases, even people who have been vegan for years, because we, of course, target more people who want to transition but are not quite yet there. So we want to transition the masses. And we felt that, maybe the vegan community already knows what they're doing, and maybe don't have such a strong use case for our app. But we were completely wrong. We have seen so many long-term vegans also use our app for the nutrition, because then they check, are they actually getting all the micronutrients that they need? And that, of course, is the whole purpose. So we're very, very glad that we're also benefiting the vegan community in that sense. But we are starting to fundraise our seed round soon. So if there are any investors listening to this, please reach out to me. It's at Anastasia at YourBeet.app to my email. And of course, if there are also any person listening to this thinking like, oh my God, I've also wanted to be part of something like this. I think people make everything, right? So I'm also a very strong believer that if this is something you resonate with, please reach out to us. I think there's so many things that a young startup always needs help with, and always needs motivated people who really believe in the mission. So please reach out, Anastasia at YourBeet.app.
Okay, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And I do encourage people to reach out, because I'm really impressed with, one, the way that you've laid the foundation so properly. Because again, a lot of people, I talk to so many people that have ideas for businesses, but they have no idea how to put a business plan together and how to get the funding and, the whole, just building that business as a solid foundation, because so many people build it as a house of cards. So I really congratulate you for that. And I'm curious, my big thing right now, as I'm getting older, because I see a lot of people my age that have really given up, and I'm going to be 70 in less than 2 years. And I look at that and I go, how did that happen? Well, a day at a time, I got older, but I'm also very, very healthy. And I always surprise the medical profession. And in our country, we have what's called Medicare. After the age of 65, you get your Medicare pay or your Social Security. I haven't started collecting yet because I don't need to. But
that's amazing.
And what's really nice is the longer I wait, the more I'll get when I do collect it. But the reality is that the people that are on Medicare, most are pretty unhealthy. And a lot of it is not their fault. A lot of it is to do with politics, food manufacturers, with profits over people. And I'm curious, as you look at what you're doing, where do you see your role as a healthy young woman who's going to be expanding your market reach and really being a voice for the voiceless in so many ways, and helping people get healthier? What do you see your role as moving forward?
Absolutely. Oh my God, Kathleen, I love this question on so many levels, but I also must say that you're such an example for all of us, right? I think you're definitely someone to aspire. I think it's amazing that you are so active in this community, because you absolutely are a role model, right? You show this example when someone else might be, and I'm also even thinking about my parents, right, who might be thinking, making excuses and, it's too late to change. But you're showing with yourself, with your own example, that, this is very much possible, and it's only, so good for you, right? So thank you so much for doing that. I think it's so important that you also are so active and showcase by your own example.
Be sure to leave a rating and review of the show. And if you're looking for more visibility, be sure to download my free guide on how to increase your influence. It's called The Influencer's Guide. Simply go to veganvisibility.com/influencer. That's veganvisibility.com/influencer. Now, back to the show. Thank you. Thank you.
But I love your question, because absolutely, I think what we are trying to do is to create this change movement, right? So we're actually organizing this event in Stockholm all about, the future of food and how we want to be the change maker. So we're bringing all the ecosystem together. So plant-based foodies, plant-based creators, plant-based influencers, brands, investors, we're bringing journalists, right? So that we actually gather in one room and start creating even more opportunities, right? And I think that is a good example, even at such an early stage that we really want to take that role of facilitating I would say accelerating or like catalyzing the ecosystem, right? Because there's so many players individually, but imagine what we can do when we come together, right? And start actually connecting people and creating more opportunities out of those connections. But I think there's so much opportunity for us to play a much active role, because what we do so brilliantly is, what our mission is to create change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because there's so many scientists, right? And the people who are into that, we already read the science, but it's I understand, but I don't understand what do I do? I don't see the action plan, right? Is usually the barrier, right? That prevents people from actually making that switch, because It's still hard. It's like, I understand, but how do I do this? So this is what we really want to act again as a catalyst. We actually even started speaking with the EAT Foundation. I don't know if you're familiar. It's a very, in Europe, they're quite big. So it's a foundation from Norway, and they worked with Johan Rockström, who's of course the lead climate scientist. And he, and together with a Harvard professor, they defined what is a climate-friendly diet. And of course, no surprise, it's like 98% plant-based, right? So, but they kind of stopped at the research, right? They very much, the scientists, and give that credential around what is a climate-friendly and healthy planetary health diet, it's called, I believe. And we want to then be that kind of vehicle that then translates or brings that science and executes it, right? And actually makes it accessible and implementable for everyone. Because that's what we can do by making it super convenient, by making it easy, right? By creating that curated personalization.
Right.
So I think that's the role that we really want to play, is that kind of accelerator catalyst that brings the ecosystem and activates it.
I love your vision. And, as you were sharing that, I was just thinking about all the challenges people experience today. For example, young couples that want to have babies, and the infertility rate is through the roof.
Yes.
And with men, their inability to have a proper sperm count, it has to do with food, and people deny that. Young girls that, they're hitting puberty at 8, 9, and 10 years old. It's crazy. And, the parents who they understand the benefit of a plant-based lifestyle, and they want to raise their babies as plant-based eaters, and they may not identify it as such. But do you see yourself? I'm just so excited about what you're doing, because as you're sharing, I can feel your passion, and the world definitely needs to change the way we're eating. There is no two ways about it, for our health, for the environment, and for the animals. It's a trifecta approach. But do you see yourself with the app, and maybe it already does this, and I definitely am going to download the app, but do you see yourself having categories for, let's say, women who want to be more fertile, and they, say 2-3 years ahead of time, they start planning their food intake so that it does support an easier time getting pregnant, or with parents who want to raise a child as a plant-based eater? Do you see yourself moving into that realm?
Kathleen, I think that would be the dream. Absolutely. Right. To actually be able to segment it into those kind of use cases and really bring the science, because this is what I can't emphasize enough. I think this is definitely the challenge that I've experienced. And when I talk to people, they've experienced as well, is that there's so much overwhelm of information out there, right? And you don't really know who to trust and who to believe. And I think that's absolutely my dream would be, is to actually be that platform that identifies the right science out there, right? And makes it accessible, translates it into actionable, here's a meal plan, or here's what you can eat. So that people know who they can trust, right? So that people understand that, oh, if I want to change my diet, this is where I go to. Because right now there's just so much, right? And there's so many incredible individuals that are, also digesting that kind of science, and they're absolutely right. But it's so hard to find all these small individuals, right? So that's what I want to kind of then, have that platform, again, kind of like what Spotify did, right, for artists, is that we would be able to then attract more scientists and people who are able to create those kind of nutrition science grounded recommendations, so that and then can verify them. So that
I have to say, if anybody can do it, you're going to do it without a doubt.
Thank you.
I think of like the senior age group, and the amount of knee replacements, hip replacements, and the inflammation, arthritis, and a lot of that can be reversed with food. And
absolutely,
actually, about a little over a year ago, I had a freak accident and I broke my wrist. And I was actually at an outdoor event, and the canopy for one of the vendors wasn't secure. A gust of wind came up, and it literally spun around, hit me on the back of the head, and I fell face first on the cement, and I broke my wrist instantly. And as I went in for the surgery and I went in for the physical therapy and all that, it was so shocking to see how many people, based on their diet, were extremely overweight. The obesity rate was just, I would say probably 80 to 85% of the people who had knee replacements and hip replacements. It had a lot to do with their lack of physical activity and their food intake. And it just, it really got me thinking about what is my purpose and how can I actually shine a light on that to say, you don't have to live like that. And I love what you're doing. And, Anastasia, I'm so glad that you came on the podcast show, because my whole purpose with this show is to really showcase people that are doing amazing things throughout the world for people's health, for the animals, for the environment. And you started the app based on what was happening in Australia with the fires. And it just was horrendous at that time. And a lot of that had to do with our food choices. And so many people have not connected the dots. So I wish you the greatest success. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people? What would you like to leave people with as far as like making different choices so they can live a healthier life, we can have a better climate, and that the children today don't have to fear for the future of if there even is going to be a planet?
I really hope there is, right? I mean, we are working very hard towards that cause. So I really hope that we will make a difference in the end. But I think definitely my recommendation is, no matter how hard it might seem, right? It feels like, especially this whole diet change and health, it just feels like such, when you're just starting in that, right? It just feels like such an overwhelming topic, and it feels so hard. And where do you start? I think my biggest, of course, advice, or what I really wish for more people, is to invest in themselves, right? We invest so much of our time, of our life, onto the job that we get employed by, right? Or the entertainment industry. Right?
I was just thinking what Netflix series we're going to binge watch. It's like, oh my gosh, while we binge eat.
Exactly. So imagine if we actually spend 8 hours that we spent working, right, for someone. Imagine if we spent 8 hours investing in ourselves. Like, imagine the difference that we could do if it was our job to actually look after ourselves. And I think that's, in our such high-paced life and this kind of chasing careers, we kind of lost our connection to our own self, and making sure that we prioritize ourselves, and that investing in our own health is the greatest investment we can do in this life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one last question. If there was anything that you need to move your vision and your business forward, what is the one thing, if you could wave a magic wand and say, this is the one thing I need, what is the one thing that you need?
Oh gosh, I think as an early stage startup, there's so many things. I would need very many ones, I think. But I think absolutely being able to build and create this kind of community of people who would support us, right? I mean, we're such an early stage startup. We're a fully female team, right? So
I noticed that. I did notice that.
right? So there are so many, and of course we are on this impact mission. So there's so many things that we are kind of fighting against the current a little bit when it comes to traditional, funding, venture capital, very masculine industry. So if we could bring, community that also believe in the mission that we're doing behind us, to support us, to promote us, to help us, to engage with us, I think that would be my greatest wish, and it would give me so much energy to keep going, right? And keep working on this, because I really, really, of course, believe that this will make a huge difference on millions of people worldwide.
Absolutely. And I wish you all the success that you can enjoy and to make a difference in the world. You're so passionate, and I love that passion. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. I'm Kathleen Gage, your host, wishing you a lot of health and making good decisions. Have a great day, a great evening, a great middle of the night, wherever you may be tuning in.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.